Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm ready too.
Okay. If I keep looking away, it's because I'm looking at a different screen with the agenda and stuff on it. All right, good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Special Village Board meeting on Tuesday, May 5th at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Lienau,
Here.
Baker,
Here.
Berto.
Here.
I don't see Bell. Duffy,
Here.
Peduncle,
Here.
and I don't see Nino. Is she
I'm
here?
here. Yes.
She's on.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So
Nate's
is
jumping on
Bell
right now.
excused?
Nate's jumping on right now. It's
Okay. Okay, then everyone's there. Thank you.
Okay. Would you please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the agenda as published.
So moved. I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Approval of the minutes as published.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. Thank you. Any changes?
I'm
Any-
sorry, who seconded it?
Vivian, Nino.
Okay,
we
thank
both
you.
did.
Any changes or anything to amend on the minutes?
I saw nothing.
Okay. Then all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Comments, correspondence, and concerns from the public. Does anybody in the audience care to make a comment? Correspondence?
I have two emails that were just received recently. The first one is from a lady by the name of Jan Vanderlyn from American Transmission Company. She says every year ATC looks for a few communities to partner with on an Arbor Day event. And she's reaching out to the village to see if the village would be interested in accepting a $250 donation for an Arbor Day event. That was that one. Then the other correspondence was actually forwarded it to Louise, and she forwarded that letter to me. It said, "Dear Louise, my husband and I own Gordon Lodge in Bailey's Harbor. So as a business owner and resident, I want to echo my support for Kay McKinley's idea that Door County is very wise to strengthen our policies which protect the public during this pandemic. It is true, as she has suggested, that many businesses in the U.S. have enforced a policy of no shirt, no shoes, no service for health reasons. I believe that in the interest of public health, that our businesses opening up during this pandemic should institute a similar policy of no mask, facial covering, no service. In light of what we have seen in many cities throughout the U.S., both masks and social distancing has had an effect on the spread of this virus. Let's do our part."
Okay.
And that was signed by Wallace and John Tinnen.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody have any correspondence they want to add? Okay. We will move down to the business items. What I'm going to do is we have 3 items on the agenda tonight. Of course, we have the COVID update one. What I want to do is have the Johnson and the property and the development agreement. I want to do that first. I know there's a number of people on here for that, and I think that will go fairly quickly. So they can leave if they want instead of sitting around and listening to us. They're also welcome after the fact to sit around and listen to us too in all of our enlightened discussions. So I'd like to move to item number 2, discussion regarding recommendation from the Plan Commission on a request from Johnson Family Trust that the village board pass and adopt resolution 424-0505-2020 that approves the certified survey map, which adjusts the total square footage of the parcels, which properly commonly referred to as the Al Johnson Swedish Restaurant and Boutique property. Consider a motion for action if appropriate.
I'll make that motion, Dave.
Okay.
I'll second.
Discussion?
Can I ask
Overview?
who seconded it, please?
Pat.
I did.
That's
Or
fine.
Chad?
Ed? Okay,
Or both of us did.
Yeah, they both did.
I'll
okay.
third it.
Your pick. Any questions or discussions on this?
None here.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Next item, discussion regarding provisions of the development agreement for the new retail storage building the owners of Al Johnson Swedish Restaurant and Boutique would like to construct at 10686 North Bay Shore Drive. Consider a motion for action if appropriate.
I'll also make that motion.
I'll second.
I did receive an email from Jim Smith, and he said that he would like the document revised in such fashion that the signature portion for the Johnson family is shown as Lars A. Johnson in his capacity as trustee of the Johnson Family Trust. So is it okay if we make that motion as amended?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, yes.
I only had one thing in there that kind of caught my eye, and that was we put in the development agreement the decibel level for any outside entertainment. And we have it at 75 dB. What I'd like to do is see us alter that. That says keep the 75 dB or any future adjustments. What I mean by that is we currently are in some lawsuits concerning our outdoor venues and the dB levels. And right now we're enforcing the 75, which is fine. But at some point in the future, we may find ourselves at a different dB level that's court ordered. So I would just like us to have something in there that basically says, or as, you know, if we're forced to make an amendment, that it would follow along with development agreements that we have.
That's okay with me.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully it won't change below that, but you never know, or above that. So consider, anybody else have any discussion on it?
Just to be clear, but on that, I don't disagree with you, but it's none of the Stabur is participating on this property, right, Freddie? That okay? Yeah, I'll go for it.
Okay. Yep. Anybody else? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. So now anybody who was here for that is welcome to stay for the rest of our discussion, but you're also welcome to leave if you got something else to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 1, discussion regarding an update on the village's response to COVID-19 pandemic. Consider a motion for action if necessary. I will start as I usually do. I have not seen today's numbers, but of course, Friday we were reported, and yesterday we were reported, we're up to 18 cases, and they have now also let us know that there's community spread. 2 of the individuals that tested positive, they were not able to track back, either it being due to close proximity to somebody who had the virus or any travel involved. So we now are in the community spread. I guess it shouldn't surprise us, given what's going on just south of us, that we should expect to see some additional cases moving forward, and hopefully they will remain low, but the anticipation is that we're going to start to see a little spike potentially, just for an FYI. Additionally, the county is still working on its long-term opening task force. There is a town hall meeting tomorrow that you can all log on to if you'd like, and it's a group discussion with public health, the hospital, and other individuals to talk with businesses and get input from the businesses on opening procedures and what they would like to see, if they need information, if they need supplies, you know, whatever it is. We're trying to get that information and get that response back from the business community. That's tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. And I believe a lot of people have received emails with the Zoom links for that. If not, if you contact the village office, we will get that Zoom link to you so you can attend. Again, that's at 4. Let's see. There's a couple of other issues. I would like to explain something first before we get into those issues first. We hear a lot about community spread, and we hear a lot about social distancing. And I guess I want to go on record as saying I'm a very large proponent and supporter of social distancing. And I'm also probably a walking advertisement for it. I didn't know this until 2 days ago, but I, in fact, had COVID-19 and was not aware of it. And I had COVID-19 between March 19th and March 31st. It was after I'd come back from Aspen and we were first having our meetings. We had our emergency proclamation on the 17th, okay? And I was in that meeting with everybody, but we were social distancing. The following week, we were also social distancing when we first met at the Village Hall. I started showing symptoms, but I didn't know the symptoms. If you recall, back then, there was a list of 3 items that were symptoms and not much else. And they also were not testing you unless you were ill enough that you had to go to a hospital. So there was no testing being done either. So that's kind of the backdrop for it. So on the 19th, I came down with what I felt was the start of a cold. You know how you get that kind of cold feeling and the next couple of days you think you're getting a sore throat and a cough. So I felt a cold coming on. I never had a fever per se. I never had a real cough for any length of time. And I forget what the other one, a slight headache. But I just felt I was coming down with something. By the time the 3rd day came along, I was extremely tired and I was sleeping 12 to 14 hours a day for 3 or 4 days. And that's also not unusual. I was also getting muscle aches and pains. Remember, I had just come back from 3 weeks of high altitude skiing where I do a lot of heavy exercise and a lot of physical exertion. And usually when I came back from those trips, I would get cramps and sore legs and sore muscles for a couple of days because I'm not using them like I was using them for a long time. And I'm also at lower altitudes. And so I didn't really think too much about it. I was always tired too. But by the time the 3rd or 4th day came along, I realized that this was probably a little bit more than just being tired and achy from my ski trip. So on the 5th or 6th day, I realized that I should start taking my temperature. Kind of dawned on me that maybe I was exposed to the virus or something. So again, I took my temperature, nothing. It was all normal. I wasn't experiencing any respiratory distress, but I was just still kind of feeling crummy. And the best I can do is describe it like this. It was different than any cold or flu I'd ever been exposed to before in my life. It was just different. I don't know how else to describe it except it just wasn't the same. On the 6th or 7th day, for about half a day, I did have a fever of 101 to 101.5. I had no fever in the morning. I had the fever in the afternoon. In the evening, I had no fever. So again, I didn't think too much about it. About that time, I also lost my sense of taste and my sense of smell. And over the next 6 or 7 days, I lost 9 pounds of weight because I wasn't hungry. I wasn't nauseous. I didn't feel like I had the flu. I just wasn't hungry. And that's when it really started dawning me that, maybe this is COVID-19, okay? But at that time, they were also saying, don't contact your doctor or the hospital unless you thought you needed care. If it was just like a cold or mild, don't worry about it. It'll last 8 to 10 days and you'll probably be okay. So that's what I did. That ended on, my last symptom was like March 30th or 31st. About 2 weeks after that, around April 15th, I had a medical appointment and I asked the doctor at the time, I said, now that we're done with the appointment, I want to ask you something about COVID-19. And I explained what had happened to me and what my symptoms were. And she responded immediately. She said, you probably had COVID-19. I'm hearing that from a number of other patients. Several of them I did send for testing because they were still active and they came back positive, but they listed the same symptoms you're telling me. About that time is when the CDC came out with the additional guidelines about loss of taste and smell and some other symptoms, 6 or 7 other symptoms that were listed. And suddenly I could check off most of those boxes as having had the symptoms. So she suggested that I wait another 2 weeks and have at least 30 days symptom-free before I have an antibody test done, because it takes a couple of weeks after you are free of symptoms for your body to show the antibodies show up in a test. So she waited a month. I went down last Thursday to Quest Diagnostics in Milwaukee, and they did a blood draw. Now, we talked about this last week, different types of tests. So they have the finger prick ones, where they use for screening. Those are 60 to 70% accurate. And they use them for screening large numbers of people, 3,000 or 4,000 at a time, give them indication. The Quest test, the way they do it is it's a venous draw out of your arm, like a regular blood draw, and they sample it twice. If you're positive the first time, they run the second tube of blood to verify it. I was positive both times, and that was a 99.9% accuracy. Okay. So at that point in time, when they told me that I'd know in 3 or 4 days, the next day is when they told me and let me know. Door County Public Health contacted me about 30 minutes after Quest gave me the information, because they obviously were required to send it to the local public health. And they talked to me about doing tracking and that sort of thing till they realized it had been 30 days. I was symptom free and I was well past any spread, and there were no other outbreaks anywhere up in northern Door County that would have been related to anything that I was involved with or anybody. Okay. So they didn't feel they didn't need to do any additional tracking. But during that period of time, I was also very active in maintaining social distancing. So that's why I said I'm probably a walking advertisement for the effectiveness of social distancing, because I was probably around 100 to 150 people during that period of time, not realizing it. After the 5th or 6th day, when I thought, oh, this might be a problem, okay, I didn't attend any more meetings, and I was no longer in contact with anybody till after the symptoms were gone. So I did socially isolate. But just FYI, it's out there and it's around. I obviously had a mild case, but there's probably more of it around than what we think. And if you think back at the time frame, that was, March 14, 15, 16, that was very early on in our process up here. I'm not even sure we had a case or two at that time. Okay. I've mentioned this to a few people around, and it's funny because a couple people that I talked to and I explained my symptoms said, oh, well, I had the same thing. I was with my sister in Milwaukee, the week before that, and I lost my taste and I couldn't smell anything, etc. And then I got a bad cold after that. Well, they probably had it too. All right. So it's probably a little bit more widespread than what we think already in Door County, which is also why it's all that much more important to maintain our social distancing and make sure that we're doing what we need to protect our friends and neighbors. So with that, I'll entertain any questions, or we'll move along and start talking to the people that give us all the input. So we can start with Chris. Are you still there? Yeah, there you are.
Yep, good evening. I'm glad you're doing well, Dave. Kind of nice to be on the other side of it, maybe, huh?
Well, it's kind of interesting because when I first actually saw the results, I was like, what? Oh my gosh. And at the same time, it was a relief.
Right.
Been through it, had it, done it. Right.
Yep.
Now we can put a face to it in Door County, so that's great. Miles, run with that.
Yeah.
Right. I say we call him patient zero.
I like it.
And we'll refer to you as the county board chair, not the village president.
Yes.
So just a few things from us, from the fire department and the coalition. We continue doing what we're doing. We're actually seeing somewhat of a drop in actual person-to-person requests, which is good. Ideally for us, we would like those requests to keep tailing off as this starts to hopefully wind down towards the end of the month. My biggest fear is that on whatever day, we don't think we're going to end the day that the state opens up, but at some point we have to end. And my fear is that the day we end, we're still getting 10, 15, 20 calls a day. To me, it'd be really nice to have a week with no calls, nobody asking for help. That would be ideal. I think that's probably not going to be what happens. But we have seen at least the last 3-4 days somewhat of a reduction in requests for assistance. With the exception of over the weekend, Gibraltar had that the issue there with COVID-19 exposure to one of their staff members where they had to close the school down in their food program. So they reached out late Friday night. We were able to pull something together with Sturgeon-based schools and continue Gibraltar's food delivery program as it was, or nearly as it was. Last week I spoke about what I thought we were seeing with some the volunteers kind of petering out or tiring out, but I'll tell you that we've posted up a bunch of volunteer opportunities in the next 3 weeks to support the Gibraltar food program. And by Sunday night, we posted them Saturday morning or Saturday noon. By Sunday night, they were predominantly all filled. So it was good to be wrong on that one. We're starting to have some discussions about common messaging between the ADRC, the food co-op, and our coalition, kind of the backbone of food support in the county. So that as we start to talk about winding down, the message is the same, the timeline is the same. So those conversations have started. Again, I was in and again, I don't want to doom and gloom, but I was in a meeting today with a group of people who are convinced that that the state is gonna extend the stay-at-home order. I personally don't think they will, but there are some people talking that way within those groups. So that's all part of that discussion we're having. But other than that, it's pretty much status quo. As far as the fire department and EMS departments themselves, calls are down. And that's not just us, that's everywhere. And, anything you read is hospital admissions and heart attacks and strokes are down. They're not really down. It's just people aren't calling, unfortunately. And I think we'll see the long-term effect of that over the next few years. So, but that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Chris? All right, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, and I'll stay on the line, Dave.
Okay, Jay? Good evening. Jay?
Good evening. Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just a little news from the Piggly Wiggly. We did start today to hand out masks. So I got my hands on some. So we did put signs up now that if you don't have a mask, please go to the service desk and we will give you a mask. We've gone through a few, but today was a lot better day than with people with masks on. So, hopefully people are getting it now and hopefully they'll be doing it. Otherwise, we got a beautiful truckload of food in today. Usually I'm ordering 2,000 pieces just to try to fill the store, and today we got close to 1,000 pieces. So hopefully, the food industry is getting caught up. The meat industry, it's going to go up, but I think we got a good handle on it, so we can stay pretty consistent with everything there. Otherwise, everything's we're sanitizing and cleaning and doing the best we can with that, and otherwise I think everything's rolling pretty good.
Jay, I have a question for you.
Yep.
What did your weekend look like? Can you give me a recap of how your Friday, Saturday, Sunday looked?
Friday wasn't bad. Saturday was busy, and Sunday was busy. There was people up here, as everybody noticed in town, and that. So a lot of people that did come up here, didn't have this mask on, but they kind of kept social distancing, and it was just. I think it was such a beautiful weekend that everybody just wanted to get out, but we were a little busier, and everybody saw that in town. Everybody was, the whole town was pretty busy.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jay? Okay, thanks, Jay.
You bet.
Miles? You're on mute, Miles. Miles?
He's working on it.
He's watching The Last Dance right now.
Yeah, watching the last.
There now. Well, it's interesting. I just got off the phone with my sister. My brother-in-law works in a hospital down in Chicago where they're getting all the COVID patients, and it's a very interesting dichotomy of being up here where it's so calm and getting the update from Jay, and she's saying that she can't get meat at the grocery store down there in the suburbs of Chicago. And then my brother-in-law, I guess, is going online to get masks because the ones they do have at the hospital where they're short are incredibly uncomfortable, and you have to wear the same one. You're getting one per day or one for every few days that you have to clean. So now he's paying $25 a mask to try and get something that doesn't drive him crazy.
Wow.
So we're pretty fortunate, obviously. I think one of the things that's been coming up to me in a lot of conversations I've had with people is just that as much as we focus a lot talking to the business owners, but I don't know if there's a way to do it, but to educate the visitors and even locals. Sorry about my dog. And and I talked to Ken Pavick. He even brought up the idea of doing something on a billboard entering town to try and educate people about wearing masks and social distancing when they arrive in the county. So I don't know. I mean, there's only so much we can put on the business owners that we saw online all weekend, all the complaints and stuff. But there's even the hotels maybe need to educate the visitors a little more too.
Did you see what was sent out by Public Health and DCMH? The little
Yeah.
one-page sheet that went out. I think they're also looking to expand that. It's actually broken down into like 4 different sections. And one of those is customers and visitors. And, hopefully that'll be expanded upon.
Yeah. It's something maybe with like all those hotels open and people coming in, if maybe even making the hotels know if they're part of educating those people. So, hey, if you're going to go out, bring a mask before you go to Husby's, before you pick up food, before you go into the stores.
Yep.
And I'll go get my dog out of the room.
All right. Thanks, Miles. John, Lowry, anything tonight?
No, other than the fact I'm glad that you are in good health now, and sorry you had to go through that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, they told me I had a very strong immune response on the test, so I guess I'm not one of those old fossils just yet.
Well, I'll welcome you to the crowd shortly.
Okay, Louise. Even though it says Bo Burnoff on your.
Someone's logged into
Don't
my-
tell her she's muted. Don't tell her she's muted.
I'm muted. Now, I heard that, Chad.
I love you, Louise.
I have a great, my hearing is still good. Okay, so, and not a lot since last week. You guys are, I think, up to speed on festivals and events. So pretty much through June 27th, we have either canceled or postponed. The postponed are Roofing of the Goats and Paddle Fest. And then we did have a conversation during Parks yesterday that Freedom Fest will be postponed and try to figure out another way to do some sort of firework. And that was July 11th, I'm sorry. And try to do fireworks maybe in a little bit different way. So no updates on festivals and events. The next one to talk about will be Brick Party by the Bay, which is a tricky one. And I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. I think we know that Plein Air was canceled. And that would have Plein Air Quick Paint would have happened at Waterfront Park. And then as far as businesses go, I think most of our businesses at this point, as we've discussed, are anxious to open, but what they're anxious for is direction on, a protocol checklist, for lack of a better word, for the different sectors, whether it's dining or lodging or retail or something like that. And I know that there are different business owners and business experts that are working on that through, I believe, the Long-Term Recovery Task Force, which you referenced, Dave. So the sooner we can get that out to them, the better. And otherwise, we're moving along and, trying to help the businesses as best we can and trying to help those that need help, either developing e-commerce or trying to figure out other ways to do business, that since the business that they are doing or not doing, is challenged. That's it.
Any questions of Louise? Okay, I'm looking at all these screens here. Did I miss somebody? No, okay. I don't think so. Okay. Obviously at Parks yesterday, we had some discussion about a number of items. And Louise can jump in on this, and anybody, business owners that are on, feel free to jump in. One of the questions came up about masks, and could the village or should the village make sure that everybody's wearing masks, put an edict out.
Well, can I interrupt, Dave?
Sure.
Sorry. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to open up the chat for those of you who can access the chat, just to streamline these conversations. If you could put your questions in the chat or raise your hand, do something so you don't interrupt the flow of the meeting. That way we can address your questions as best as possible. I just want to keep the flow as fluid as possible.
Okay. So the idea behind mask was, I guess the way we'd like to see the mask issue handled is similar to what Jay brought up. I would like to see the businesses get together and amongst themselves decide, yes, we want to have customers wear masks, we want to have staff wear masks or whatever, and put up a consistent messaging, whether it's on the door or the window of your business. If you want masks, masks required or no mask, no service, or there's lots of little posters and little signs I've seen out there. But I think if we got together with our businesses and it was a consistent message, consistent sign, so people as they were in town would recognize and notice that most places you go are going to require masks, and hopefully that would help them to have masks. Denise.
I spent most of the morning today calling business owners pertaining to this issue. The pharmacy already has a sign that says you cannot enter without a mask. Youngworth's opened their doors either today or yesterday, so they are no longer doing curbside pickup. They have a sign on their door. It does not say no mask, no service, though, or that type of wording. It's just that they're recommending please wear one, and it is not mandatory. Jerry's Flowers also has a sign up where hers basically does say if you're not wearing a mask, you cannot enter. I also talked to Alicia Kursabe at Ecology, Yenny from Spot and Space, Drew from On Deck, Shannon from Twisted Tree. You already know how Birdos, or I feel about it for Birdos. And with all of those people that I spoke with, this was their synopsis of, they were looking for direction and leadership. They really would like to see consistency for all the businesses across the board. That, they don't want 50 different businesses having 50 different rules. They also told me that their employees are the ones who are telling the employers how they will feel safe, and that is if customers coming in are wearing masks. They also realize that they will not make everyone happy, that there is a certain segment of the population that will be offended, ticked off, not want to do it. And that's also a concern that if, when I talked to all these businesses, let me backtrack. I presented it as it was a topic of conversation for tonight's meeting, that Parks had talked about it the night before. No recommendation was made. And they were, and I told them that the village could, if they deemed it appropriate and suitable, that they could make an emergency proclamation and mandate it for all of Sister Bay. They were all in favor of that, because what they said is it took the onus off of them. It is a law by the village. If you have a problem, go talk to the village. The village becomes the bad people. They were also concerned about if it wasn't mandated and they're trying to do it individually in their own businesses, you have somebody come in, your employees don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, you nicely ask them to leave, you end up in having choice words and altercation, and then it just becomes a bad situation all the way around. If individual businesses do it, there's no teeth in it. It is not law. It is not mandatory. And so out of those people that I talked to, they were in favor of it. Chris is still on the line. I mentioned it to him when we were talking about something else this evening. He liked the idea. I'll let him comment if he chooses to. I also did talk to Jay. He's more, his perspective was a little bit different. He was torn on the issue, but what is the village board's goal, or what is our responsibility? And I believe that it's to protect the health and economic well-being of our residents and visitors. Our job is to provide leadership even when it's an uncomfortable decision that we are making. And as we have stated before, I think Chad brought this up at a couple of meetings ago, no business wants to be the first business who has a case tracked back to them. And what would that mean if a business were to have, let's say, a few infected employees? You know, would they have to shut down? Would they have enough employees then to still operate? And what would the PR on social media and just the rumor mill be pertaining to that business? So I think I understand on having businesses just put up their own signage, but I also think it creates a lot of problems. And the reason I made the phone call is that these are businesses in Sister Bay, in our community. I wanted to hear what they had to say. I didn't just want to make, you know, a pitch for something that I thought was a good idea without knowing, you know, how the rest of some of the businesses felt. Granted, it's a small sampling. It's not everyone. I also was only able to talk to 2 lodging facilities because so many of them are closed and there's just answering machines. I talked to Robin at Scandinavian Lodge, and I also talked to Warren at Country House. Robin was in favor of it. Warren at Country House said their setup is a little bit different. They don't have hallways, that they're all outside access doors. That people would be able to social distance. In his particular property, he didn't think it was a good idea. He didn't think it was a bad idea. He just didn't feel that it pertained necessarily to him. They are also following industry guidelines. So obviously this would probably not pertain to restaurants. If you're going into a restaurant to eat, you cannot wear a mask, you know, and eat at the same time. That's my information.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea to wear masks. I think Denise is right about the leadership, you know, for the village to take that position. I think it does. I think if you ask for it to go piecemeal, it's not going to work very well. It does take the onus and the pressure off the businesses. I know some of them would like to be masked, or like their, you know, the people that are visiting them, whether it be, you know, retail or lodging, to be masked. You know, I've talked to people about that a little bit. Again, I don't see a downside. It's not that cumbersome. It's not a bad position to take. No shirts, no shoes, no mask, no service. You know, the biggest thing will come back to enforcement, and you know, and I'll pick on Jay. He's on here. Jay, are you willing to enforce it, or are your employees willing to enforce it? And I would guess that we're going to get a 50%. You know, people aren't going to necessarily enforce it. But again, the position can still be there.
The biggest, just if I can say something real quick, we're going to hopefully start on Friday. What I want to do is, we have our senior citizen hours, and what I want to do now is I want to get on Facebook, and I want to change it, and I want to put it for 9 to 11 when it's our senior citizen hours. It's mask. You got to have a mask to come in. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And Friday, I'm going to stand out front with a box of masks, and I'm going to see what really, you know, what's going to go on. You know, my biggest fear is, you know, it's a great idea. Like Denise said, when I talked to her a little bit, you know, I'm torn about it. But the biggest thing is if the county or if the state doesn't mandate something, in the village of Sister Bay mandates something, you know, I'm afraid for a lot of businesses, like, all of a sudden people are going to say, well, Sister Bay doesn't want us around. You know, they don't want us to come up and visit their town. They don't, you know, that's my biggest fear, you know. And then if you do it for the business, and then, you know, all of a sudden a restaurant, you know, obviously you can't wear them in a restaurant because you can't eat with them on. But then all of a sudden, if that first restaurant, you know, has a case or something, well, then it just defeats the purpose for everybody else. I mean,
The-
you know, yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay.
The other issue, is the supply of masks. We can require it, but what's going to happen if we can't keep masks available? And is it the village's position? The village is going to provide the masks? I will tell you, we, the coalition, are working with sew masks for Door County, and they can't keep up. Right now, they've been asked to divert a lot of their masks to Brown County. So all of a sudden, if we do put this in place, or the village puts it in place, and we can't provide the masks, so now what do we do? So again, the law of unintended consequences, we really need to make sure that it's not just a quick, while I am in favor of it, but we need to work through all of the different possibilities. And chief of them to me would be, what is our supply going to be, or our business supply of masks going to be?
I think that's a good point. First off, Denise, thanks for doing all that legwork. To Chris's point, if we go this direction, not asking for businesses to get these masks for free, but it'd be great to have the village be able to purchase them and we buy them from the village, because it's hard to get shit right now. Pardon my language, but it's not easy. And to get them for our staff is okay. We're great. Our staff wears them. But for us to hand them all out the door, I haven't been able to get them. So I would need help. And, it would be great if the village maybe could facilitate that somehow, and then we buy them from the village.
Okay.
Are
And
we-
Randy?
I'm a restaurant, so I don't know what can be done there anyway.
Randy?
Thank you. I'd like to give the legal perspective to it, if I can, with
Please.
respect to mandating masks. And remember in the beginning of this whole thing when I said that the powers that the village is going to exercise were like wartime powers and haven't been exercised since World War II, and they trump individual rights. Things are starting to swing the other way. And when I say that, I listened this morning pretty intently to the arguments before the state Supreme Court challenging Andrea Palm and the governor's latest order. And what I heard was enough to tell me that it's pretty obvious that the state Supreme Court is going to reverse the latest order of the Department of Health Services Secretary and the governor. I don't know when their decision is going to come out, but they expressed a real problem with the extent of the control taken by the state over individual rights. So there's a swing going the other way, and that type of thing is going to be the springboard to challenging things like a mandate to wear masks in a community. So I don't want to say that the law is there yet, but I can see it's going to be changing in the next few days. I will be shocked if that order isn't reversed in some respect based on what I heard this morning.
And when you say that law may be reversed, does the whole thing just go away and there's nothing left of it?
They had some discussion about that. What do? Do they just open the floodgates if we decide that it has to go away? And what it sounded like they were heading toward is giving the governor and the Department of Health Services a 6-day window to create a new order, hopefully in consultation with the legislature, because the legislature is the one that brought the lawsuit. But right. To replace the old order, because what it sounds like the court's going to do is throw out all or part of the old order, but give them 6 days to come up with something else. So there won't be a time period when it's just wide open. We don't know what's going to come next, but it's pretty obvious this order, as it presently stands, is going to be reversed.
So when you talk about individual rights, what about my employees' rights to stay healthy? What about their rights?
It's a balancing act. And like I said in the beginning, there wasn't anyone that was challenging whatever needed to be done in order to protect public health and the safety of everyone involved. Now you can see it around you. You can see people getting tired of being told they have to do this, they have to do that, they have to stay home. And now you see it coming out in the lawsuit. And one of the justices expressed, you know what, I may feel that you, on a policy level, are right. You need to do something about this in order to protect the public. But you can only go so far in limiting individual rights. You can't arrest people on their doorstep just because they walked out of the house. That's the type of thing that they're discussing. So there's going to be some more looking into and fine tuning just what the state can do versus the individual rights. And by the way, I wanted to say to Chris, thank you for the nice card from the Fire Chiefs Association. Allison made 400 masks.
Wow,
Nice.
that's awesome.
Nice.
Randy, do you think that then would apply, we're talking about Sister Bay, but would something like that apply to Sister Bay or possibly the county or something like that? Is that what you're inferring?
What I'm inferring is there's going to be a ratcheting down of the ability of local governments to impose on individual rights. It's anybody's guess at this point where this all ends, but it's certainly the swing has turned the other way from public safety to individual rights. So what I'm saying is, if we do a mandate of masks for all persons in public, there's a reasonable chance that's going to be subject to somebody challenging it. And given the state of where the law is headed, there's a reasonable chance we would get that reversed.
That was my question. That's what, okay.
Can I just say too that I know people who, if you ask them nicely, would be more than happy to wear masks. They understand that. But if you tell them they have to, it just irritates them and they just want to rebel. And so I'm leaning toward just doing everything we can to encourage people to do it. But to order it, I'm a little hesitant to do that.
Well, just for an example, Vivian, I was at work at the gas station on Monday for 2 measly hours doing my orders. So I was out on the floor, I was masked, my employee was masked, and we put up a sign stating, to protect, customers and staff, please wear a mask when entering. 50%, and it's right by the door, and it's not small, it's huge. Sitting right on the floor when you walk in. 50% of the people that came in those 2 hours did not have masks. And I believe that it's infringing upon the rights of my employees. I'm not there that often, so I can't even include myself. My sister is, so it's her and my employees. And I believe it's just utter disrespect to other human beings.
Denise, I don't disagree with you. I know, at least in our business, we feel like we're going to have a counter and we're going to have to control doors and flow and count people and enforce whatever we have to enforce, because no matter what happens from the overturn, if the overturn happens, we're still going to have rules to abide by. I'm not naive to that fact. For you to staff somebody to be outside and control that, you can. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but we're going to have to all do this crap. And it's for a good reason, because it will keep people safer. It will social distance them, because they won't be able to walk into Husby's and social distance themselves. It's going to be impossible. So you do have that right as a business owner, and you can have somebody outside and say, hey, to come inside and make a transaction, we require you to have a mask. Here's a mask. And it can be done nice, like Vivian saying. I do think there are those people that just don't like to be told what to do. And even if it's for their best, for their personal safety, I think we're all going to be going through that. And we're going to have doormen. That's, I want to have bouncers at night when we're too busy. I don't want to have doormen keeping people out, but that's the reality of what business is going to look like. So I think you just might have to look at your model a little differently, and I'm not saying it's easy and it's going to cost more, but it's, I don't see any other way to do it, really.
Well, I think the other way to look at it too is plan for the worst, because the business that we're in, we plan for the worst and hope for the best. We plan for 90-mile-an-hour winds raining sideways, and then we hope for a beautiful sunny day. So in planning for the worst, you protect your employees as best you can. Denise, you've done an amazing job with that. And I know It's just infuriating. But if you plan for the worst and protect your employees, and then, as Chris said, the most important element in this whole thing is having enough masks. So when we did the count for Chris, our employee need at peak season is 3,600 masks. So if we have 5 customers, 10 customers per employee, that's how many masks we need. And take that times 10 again. Now, hopefully you can buy a mask that can be washed again. You got somebody that can wash it and bring it back. Do you know what I mean? So they're not throwing these things away. We need a lot of masks, And so hopefully you've got individuals at businesses that are making them, which is perfectly fine, and they're washable. But the first thing to do is to assume that people aren't going to be respectful, and you got to protect your employees. I hate to say that, but that's where you start, and then you do everything else you can to mitigate somebody from maybe not doing the right thing, which would be to provide a mask and say, here you go. But you got to get a lot of them.
Yeah.
And you got to wash them every night. Otherwise, you're throwing a lot of masks away. You're spending a lot of money. You can't get a KN95 for less than $3, $4. And those you can wash maybe 3 times. And you don't want those. They're uncomfortable. You just got to make them. Right, Chris? They're pricey.
Hey, Denise.
Correct. You won't find
them. Where your checkout counter is? Have you put plexiglass up? Cell counters.
Oh yeah, long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, same with us. We're going to have to put a plexi in the visitor center. We'll ask them what they need and all that stuff, and when they're touching every single one of the 250 brochures we have. So you just have to figure it out. If you touch it, you take it. Or we put one out, they request it, we go get it, we give it to them. So you just gotta, that's what you do.
So what's our consensus on the mask issue? I guess that's the answer, right?
Just to speak on Denise's behalf, I would say I don't think we have a single retailer doesn't want people to wear,
Of course. Right.
not want people to wear masks in their stores.
Right.
So it sounds like Randy is saying if we do this, we will likely, have Lisa MacDonald's asking a question, Bo. We will likely have somebody that says, that challenges it. So to avoid that, our office is more than happy to work with the individual businesses to see what we can figure out to help them, help themselves with masks without having to put this into place. I mean, we're happy to do that.
I'll just interrupt. We do have a comment. Lisa MacDonald said in the chat, figure it out, ? Require masks in all buildings and public areas.
Right, but Lisa, I couldn't agree more. You have to hope somebody takes it, puts it on. What do they do with it later? Do they take it with them? Are they throwing it away? Are we recycling them? How are we getting them? It's all things we have to think about. And all things.
They bring their own masks. Everybody has a mask.
And I kind of agree with Lisa on that. I understand, Chris, your point on if people don't have them. How can we be this far into a pandemic and people don't have a mask for themselves? I'm not saying that it's not happening, but I would think the majority of people have some kind of mask. And certainly,
they're not going to travel without them. They're going to bring their masks.
No, they're not.
Okay,
Yes, they
well,
Many people that are traveling.
Population will not bring masks.
before we go into this, let's just make sure everyone understands. We cannot just interrupt.
Okay, so I think the biggest issue that I see is I'm still against the village mandating it. The village doesn't have a supply of masks. The village can't get a supply of masks. There's not enough masks currently just to take care of all your frontline people. When we go through the Emergency Operations Center, it took them weeks to get enough just for our first responders and our EMS and our sheriff. Okay, so it's not going to be readily available where there's thousands of masks that we can just make available to everybody.
doesn't have to be that way.
So to require somebody to have it and then not be able to provide the mask doesn't get you where we want to go.
I agree with Dave.
Do we require shoes? Do we require shirts?
I don't think the village does. You can go barefoot in places if you want to allow it.
Well, you're saying no shirts, no shoes, no service. But you don't supply the shoes or the shirts.
You can't use the sign, no shoes, no shirts, no masks, no service, if you don't supply the shoes and the shirt. Right?
Then just don't leave the shoes and shirt off it and just put the masks. If that's what you want to do. I hear what you're saying, but it's a moot point.
Anything to not require a mask. Anything, right? Mask. Yeah.
You guys could require them.
Well, we will. Yes, we definitely will.
And I would like to see the individual businesses put the sign up, like everybody's talking about, mask required. And hopefully people will bring their own masks. But I don't want to see the village get into a situation where we have to provide masks and we're at the legal and liable risk because there's not mask available for a particular business because we put an edict out there. Then we become liable for the business.
No, I never wanted the village to supply masks. I was going off the assumption that everyone should have one.
And they will.
Yeah.
What do you mean they will?
Okay, so how about I'll make a suggestion. Since we know things are probably going to change yet this week from the Supreme Court, we're going to meet again next week. Let's see what the Supreme Court is going to do, because they'll have 5 or 6 days to work together then with the governor and the legislatures and see if they can come up with a new acceptable plan. But right now, under the current order, the state order, masks are recommended, but not required.
Dave, do you have any inclination from your contacts? I know you talk to kitchens periodically, and I believe you have stated in the past that the whole reason that, they were suing is because I didn't have any say-so in this. Do you know what the GOP's agenda, is, what they're looking for if this is overturned?
Well, I can't speak for Mr. Kitchens, but I can give you what my discussions have been with Joel and other legislators and public health. They feel that they want a seat at the table. They don't want the governor to just make his edicts or put his orders out without input from the legislative side. And they're more than willing to sit down and work something out. There was I forget what they call the Merck group, put together a opening plan for Wisconsin that they're behind. But they also are willing to put in place some of the public health requirements before they move to those phases. So the declining cases, declining testing, et cetera, they're willing to work on that. So they just, from what I'm told, they want to have a seat at the table, come up with a plan that's acceptable to both sides. Keep in mind the public health and public safety as number one, but to put together a joint plan that both sides can agree upon. And that's what I was expressed by them as that's why they were suing. It wasn't to create the problem. It wasn't to reopen the state. It was to have a seat at the table to come up with the guidelines and come up with a plan together.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Okay. So do we agree we'll wait to see what the Supreme Court does in the next day or two?
Sure, we can talk about it again.
Talk about it again, because it would, under the Supreme Court, I believe, Randy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think May 11th would be the end of that period of time that Governor Evers could have his emergency proclamation in place. And that's why they're trying to get it done this week, so they have 5 or 6 days prior to the 11th to put a program in place that everybody can agree to.
I believe that's right as far as the timing. But today they didn't give a hint as to when they intended to have their decision out. They just said, we're going to discuss this afternoon. So
right.
Whether they came to a conclusion already, I don't know. But their decisions are usually pretty long.
Yep. Well, could be, but again, May 11th is only, what, 6 days away?
Yeah.
So, okay, so we got another meeting. We'll wait till we find out what the results of that are. But in the meantime, as a business owner, I would certainly encourage anybody, if they want to make sure masks are worn in their facility, to post it as such. I mean, I think you got to do what you have to do to protect yourself and your employees. Okay, next thing. There was a question about closing or not closing the parks, the beach, et cetera, at parks yesterday. I'll give my 2 cents first. I believe we should keep the parks open, we should keep the beach open, and we should keep bathrooms open, particularly in Hendrickson Park. We are going to have visitors. We are going to have people around in the parks. That's one of the great things we have up in Door County is space. So I would like to see people given the opportunity to enjoy what we have. And we can put signs up, please help us keep these open by respecting social distancing, respecting your neighbor, and operate that way unless we absolutely have to close it for some reason. But I am personally against just closing them to close them. I think we need to give people an opportunity to social distance and do the right thing. We can always alter that decision if we need to.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Another one we had was, I think everybody on the board is aware of this, or they may not be, but we have I'll call it an open carry law for alcohol, which allows anybody to drink alcohol in cups, et cetera, throughout the village and the parks. And there was a suggestion made that we take a look at suspending that particular ordinance for the term of the emergency order of the state. There was concern that people are being able to take a carry-out drink that cannot be consumed on premise, but they can move to a public property, a sidewalk, a park, or whatever it may be, and that they can then drink it there. And the issue becomes, does that then encourage social gathering? Is there social distancing being taken place? I have, and I'm not going to name names, okay, but I have a number of social media pictures that were sent to me from Chicago over the weekend that clearly showed, what was happening as a result in public spots. There was also pictures that showed that things were perfectly safe. So, there were both sides were represented. But I think the issue becomes, what I'm hearing from Chicago is basically, oh, hey, Door County is open. Let's go there, because they saw, quote, what was happening. I'm not trying to restrict any business. I'm not trying to cause anybody problems or issues. But when I look at the greater good, if you will, I have a hard time maintaining our open carry law, especially over the coming weeks and as we move into Memorial Day weekend, where anybody can pick up a to-go cup and walk across the street so they're not drinking on premise, be up and down our sidewalks and in our parks. Just my opinion, but that's what I would ask us to do. Temporary. I'm also not looking to overturn the ordinance. I'm not trying to do that. I just want to suspend it for a short period of time.
And Dave,
yep,
I understand, and that you said that well. I guess my thought is on it. This past weekend was great for us to practice. The weather this weekend may not even cooperate with us trying to practice. We got a long way to go to get to wherever we're going to get to operate as a business. That's one of the benefits of getting food and drink in Sister Bay is going to that park. I see people all the time before Saturday grabbing food from us and going to the park and eating it. And it's a big reason people even order from us in the first place in other businesses in town. I have a hard time accepting the fact that one bit of sale is discriminated against versus another. I do get the fact that people will post social media and they will say things that will happen. I can't control the world. I do have a really hard time with us on May 5th pulling out a scalpel on this. Those are my feelings. I think it's cutting out one little section And we haven't went after any other business at this point. We've been trying to be helpful of anybody that can do anything. And I feel this is the opposite of that.
I think if this was part of a broader subject at Parks, and I think if the board has general consensus that we are not going to close the beach and we are not going to close the park, then suspending that rule is for naught. If we were going to close the beach and close the park, then maybe it might be appropriate. But if we're going to keep it open, it shouldn't matter what they're choosing to drink.
Can I comment, Dave?
Sure, please, Chris.
I guess if you're gonna try to limit carryout, what are you gonna do if I, bring wine from home to the beach, or if I go to Berto's or the Pig or anywhere and just buy a 12 packet or a 6-pack and go sit at the beach? I mean, how are you gonna enforce that, or where are you gonna draw the line? Who's gonna enforce it? I understand that it does make some sense as far as the spread of the disease and the virus, but we also have to look at the practicality of it. And are we going to drive? If people are going to take alcohol and go outside, if we're not going to allow them to do it here, they're going to congregate somewhere. And while that's not an excuse, we have the biggest area, we have the biggest park, we have, a lot of, maybe we need to do a better job if we allow that to get them to practice social distancing in the park. I saw Lisa asked about the picnic tables. Yeah, put them in there and you can have to figure out how to keep them clean, but stake them down more than distances apart so they can't put them together. I mean, we could try to legislate this to no end, but I don't know how you're going to do it.
Okay.
Well, and to expand upon, I guess, Lisa's question about, how are they going to keep them clean? I think the consensus was, Lisa, at our Parks meeting yesterday is that we were not going to put out the picnic tables until the Safer at Home order was over, correct, Dave?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, at least to the 28th, yes. Or 26th, right. Whatever it was.
26th, right. Or if that changes, whatever, date that may be. So we were not going to encourage that until the Safer at Home order expired. We also talked about opening up the bathrooms, the new bathrooms that were built, and how often they would be cleaned, and kind of making signs that, the bathrooms are here for your use. They are cleaned, for an example, twice a day, use at your own risk. And I guess the same would go for the picnic tables. If you want to go to the beach in the park and you want to go there, that's your risk level. There's only so much cleaning that our Parks Department can do that's reasonable.
Dave, maybe this is the opportunity to start signage. I think it was Chris that mentioned it, to begin signage, not as it relates to intoxicants necessarily, but this would be a great time because it takes time to do signs anyway, and to have them done in so they look okay and they're consistent, and talk about what the messaging should be and things like that. This would be a great time to do it, to get ready for that and see what happens. And, some people are not going to be socially distant and some are. I was at the beach this weekend because I was working on this at the stage. I was putting some things away. We had 30 people at the beach, and it was very obvious that there was a couple together. There were, it was families. It was, and I'm at the beach every single day all summer, at least twice a day. And Maluska and I go out and take counts all the time, and we look to see what people are doing. And it's interesting because it's always the same. They always act the same. They go to the same places. They do the same thing. And there's more and more creep from the beach up to the grass. And there'll be more of that this year because we're losing the beach. Mm-hmm. And also, it's hot on the beach, and you get more of a breeze in the grass. And people will do that, but they have a tendency when they're social distancing. So you have to remember this. When they're together, it's groups of people they're not strangers. Mm-hmm. So we have to sort of keep that in mind, that does happen. Now, how they're behaving is a different story. I'd love for them to not leave trash all over the place, but nonetheless, I think this would be a perfect time to talk about the messaging, amongst the board and see what that would look like and get that out there. So, and maybe not just at the beach, maybe it's, in other parts, because we have it going on. I mean, I've seen it at the dog park where people, because, there's a porta potty there. So, I mean, there's some respect that could be, I mean, even at the sports complex. I mean, we've got pickleball, we've got tennis courts, all of that. So maybe this is the time to do that.
Is Danny Lundquist still on?
Yes.
Because he was on yesterday's meeting for parks also when we were talking about signs, and he was saying that the county was making them. Dan, what's usually the turnaround for when you place an order for a sign?
It depends on how busy they are. They've done it within a couple of days, and they've taken a couple of weeks.
So if it would take them a couple of weeks, now is the time for us to get messaging and sizes and wording all put together. Okay.
How about a banner downtown?
Oh, where the happy spring is?
Yeah. By that time, it'll be happy summer. Sure. Yeah, we could put a banner. Yeah, you bet. Actually, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. I mean, I don't know, it's up to you guys, but we could certainly do a banner, and we could welcome people, or so that we've been talking about how to welcome them, whether it's residents or whether it's, everybody likes to be welcomed. So we could certainly put a message out like that. We have two banners, by the way. We have a big one right by the pavilion stage, and we have a big one at Millen 42, and we have one at the top of the hill that will be congratulating graduates, and that will be up for, probably a month. And we're going to order that. That'll be ordered tomorrow. That'll be in usually takes about 10 days.
Okay, good.
And banners take 10 days minimum. So if we're going to order it, we need to order it right away.
Okay. Who do we need to work with on verbiage?
We can come up with something. You guys can look at it, see what you think. I'd like to run it by some business, some of our business partners.
Okay.
You certainly don't want me to be involved because my wording would be way too crass.
Oh, Denise.
Louise said it.
How about, Denise, I was thinking like, get out of here.
Louise, send it to me when you guys are comfortable with it.
No, how about this, Denise? Please go to Birdo's. Okay. No, on your way out. On your way out, go to Birdo's and don't wear a mask.
But bring your mask with you, right?
Free masks at Birdo's.
Any other comments on that?
No, I think the banners are a really great idea. Certainly larger, more visible. Yeah, but I do think too that we should still concentrate on a smaller permanent bathroom sign, letting people know, if you have a cleaning schedule that you're comfortable with, thinking about and sharing, I think that really needs to be notated. Some people may think that they're clean constantly, and we know how abused those bathrooms get, and you can tell, when they haven't been clean. The public are just pigs. But yeah, I think we need to have something smaller there for people using them.
I would still like to see us put smaller signs around the beach and around the park too.
Oh, yeah.
Just, please keep social distancing. Please help us keep it open, that kind of thing.
When you go to any beach in Florida, there's a sign right when you walk on about not littering. I've never been to a beach in Florida that doesn't have a sign like that. And they have trash cans everywhere. It's still littered, but.
Dan, do you have a question?
Dan, go ahead.
Dave, you mentioned about opening them Memorial Weekend. We usually open them Mother's Day weekend. So did you want them open earlier?
What was our discussion yesterday? Didn't we?
That we were going to keep them closed until Memorial
Day weekend, yeah.
Real quick, Dave, Bo brought this up in our Marina Committee meeting because Parks has been talking about bathrooms, Marina's been talking about bathrooms.
Yep.
We need to really decide here for all of us so we're consistent. Which is, if we're Memorial Day, great. In Marina, if we're good with that. But I think we just, have to have a policy that's consistent.
What did the Marina decide, Chad?
Pat, what did we do? We decided we were going to talk about it tonight and make a decision tonight with you guys.
Okay.
So
what are you?
I told them Parks already
just
had different plans than what we had. We were closed, and I'm like, we just need to figure it out here.
Yeah. Did you, or are you talking about, what bathrooms are you talking about opening? Just the
We're
two
talking
singles
about
or the whole thing?
The public ones.
The two public ones.
Yes.
With two,
Right,
with
Pat?
two
I
separate
mean,
doors.
private, we can kind of control a little bit more because we're trying to encourage people to use their both bathrooms
Yes, right.
and they can still use the public if they need to,
Yep. Okay.
but more the public.
Okay. When does is the marina open already?
Yes.
Okay. But at the moment, anybody who has a boat there, they're being asked to use the bathroom on their boat or someplace else?
Yeah, I don't think anybody that has a boat there is
there, right?
on the boat yet.
Okay. Because didn't I understand that you weren't going to be doing pump outs?
We are doing pump outs.
You are doing pump outs?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got to do one or the other. If you don't have the
Yeah,
bathroom,
right.
you got to have pump outs.
Right. Okay. Well,
I think
Otherwise, you're going to see stuff going on that you really don't want to see going on at the park.
right. Well, no, that's why I asked.
with drinking.
I misunderstood because I understood that you weren't going to do pump outs.
I think our thought was a little easier to close down, but you brought up a good point at Parks. There's going to be people here and they're going to need to use the bathroom. So it's more of there's people using the launch. They'll be going out. They'll be coming back. This isn't, so we just want to be consistent with, the rest of the waterfront, basically.
Right. Well, anybody have an idea other than Memorial Day?
I mean, Pat, what do you think?
It somewhat depends on the weather, but like last weekend, there was a fair amount of people in town, and I just assume people have the ability to wash their hands well and use public facilities as opposed to start seeing people behind bushes and walking around with dirtier hands.
Mm-hmm.
Chad, let me ask you a question. As under the current orders, are you allowed to let anybody in Husby's to use the bathroom?
I don't think so, but I don't know that. We haven't.
I was looking through the order and could not.
Here's the deal. I think we can let people in our restaurant. We can have, you can order takeout in restaurants, technically. We're not practicing that. So yeah, I think we could allow people in our bathroom, but I don't know. But we can actually allow people to come in and order food. They can order at the counter. We're not doing that. We got a good system and we're going to, avoid that as long as we can. That's a good question. I just go in the back parking lot, Denise.
Well, sooner or later, you got families and they have kids and they start eating, and then, they need to clean the kids up, and they need the restrooms. And so maybe it's weekends until Memorial Day, maybe. Could you do that? Open them
Or
up?
how about we wait again until next Tuesday when we know what the order is, and if there's any changes, we'll be able to know. This weekend doesn't look like a really great weather forecast, not saying that we may not be just as busy this weekend, but it doesn't look hot. And then by next Tuesday, we'll know what the forecast is for the upcoming weekend, and maybe then we could make a decision. We'll postpone this conversation until then.
I like that.
We can do that. That's fine. The other thing we'll have to do next week is also reevaluate if we're going to extend our emergency declaration or let it expire. Because I think it's the 16th.
Yep.
So next week would be our last meeting prior to that.
Okay.
So make sure we'll put that on the agenda. But, that's all I had. Anybody else, anything else they want to add or a different subject they want to bring up concerning what's going on under these orders and pandemic, et cetera? How about anybody in our audience? I'll give you an opportunity.
Let's give them a second because they might be muted. It takes a couple may
Yes.
take a minute
Yeah.
to get that.
I'm watching. I see all the red marks, all the red mics.
Well, and Bo, I mean, there's the number 6 by chat. Did we address all the questions?
Yeah, the questions have been addressed.
Okay.
That's mostly me.
Okay. If nobody has anything else they'd like to bring up, I think we're done for this evening. We'll be meeting again next week, same time, same location. And a motion to adjourn would be in order.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Night.
Bye. Well, can I stop it now?
Yeah.
Okay.